Hey guys, welcome to Art 15 Graphic Design Remote. So strange day today. The power just went out, everything was fine, and then it went out. So class was canceled and we were evacuated. Apparently the power's back on now, but the school is still closed. So I'm going to do this class remote, taking me back to kind of 4 years ago, pandemic times, kind of weird, but so we're doing several things today. We're going to talk about the industry a little bit and kind of the way you can work in graphic design and go over the differences. There's just two differences. And there's also going to be some guest speakers. Again, this is all going to be live in class. The speakers were coming in on Zoom, but it was live. But now I'm just going to record them and let you guys watch the videos. I'm going to ask the same questions. There's going to be a quiz based on the videos. And then I'm going to have you write uh, some questions to ask them. Let's just get started here. I'd like to talk about design. There's two different kind of pathways that you can go down in design. One is the creative side and one is the production side. And I want to go over the differences. Two different ways you can do graphic design. One is creative, one is production, and I'm going to talk about kind of the differences of both. There are two distinct phases, and each one is different. Now, you are getting to the same result in that you're completing successfully or solving a problem for a client. And we can work together with the creative team, the production team, or you can also, if you work in a small firm, you can also do both. And especially freelance, you do both. The creative side focuses more on the ideation of the design, the conceptualization, and generating the original ideas. So they're coming up with the ideas. They're brainstorming, they're sketching, they're exploring various visual concepts to address the design brief or client requirements. So they're figuring out ways to solve the problem. The tasks that creative designers do is they develop the overall look and feel of a design. They choose the color schemes, the typography, they select the imagery, and they come up with a layout. So they're actually designing how it's going to look. They bring innovative and visual appealing solutions to solve these design problems. So they're not just merely solving the problem with just kind of anything. They're actually coming up with something that really resonates and it looks good and it makes people want to look at it. They collaborate with clients and art directors and other team members to explore and refine design concepts. So it's especially if you're working in a firm, you're going to be working with an art director, you're going to be working with a client, maybe a project manager to come up with the perfect solution. There's feedback given, there's revisions, and the team works together to achieve the desired creative vision. So they're working together to solve the problem. Now, the skills to work in the creative end of design. First of all, you have to be creative. You have to be artistic. Now, artistic doesn't necessarily mean that you have to know how to draw and paint, but you need to know design principles, you need to know art principles, composition, and you need to know honestly what looks good together, what looks bad together, and needs to be visually appropriate for the problem that you're solving. You need to understand the design principles. Like I said, you need the ability to think outside the box. You're not just solving the problem with the first thing that comes to mind. You're working either on your own, but with a client, or again, you're working with a team to develop an idea. Production, on the other hand, is you are executing the finalized and approved concepts. You're translating the design into a format that is ready for printing, digital distribution, or implementation across various mediums. So you're taking perhaps a design that someone has come up with and you're changing or you're translating it, you're converting it to the different formats. So if it's a magazine ad, you're going to take that magazine ad and you're going to make it fit those different formats. The tasks that production designers do is you're refining and preparing the design for production. You're ensuring the proper file formats and resolution and color modes, and you're preparing the assets for print or digital platforms. Print and digital production has very specific kind of rules, and production artists need to know how to make sure that the files that they're submitting are following those rules. And it's really important. Otherwise, it will print terrible or it'll look terrible on a digital display. They also collaborate closely with printers and developers, developers being web developers, to ensure that the design translates well into the intended medium. So again, making sure that the vision is executed appropriately and looks good in print or on digital displays. I think the key difference here is that the production artist or designer does not come up with the idea. The idea is given to them or is sent to them. Maybe it's rough and they need to execute the final design, but the idea itself, the actual creative idea, is already been established. The skills for production designers is the attention to detail. You need to know the rules. You need to make sure that the files and the work that you're submitting follows those rules to the T. Like, it's really important. You need to be technically proficient in the design software. So if you're using any of the Adobe products, or even if you're using video editing programs, After Effects, whatever, those things, you need to make sure that the files are set up correctly, they're at the right specs, and that it looks the way that it was intended to. You also need to understand the printing pre-press process. And we're going to go over this a little bit later in the class. But again, there are specific rules that the printers need to have followed to make sure that the printing is done correctly and appropriately. Otherwise, it'll look terrible, or the printer will have to do the work themselves and they'll charge you for it. They also need to know, production designers also need to know the rules of digital production. And, like I said, they need to know the file sizes and make sure that everything's in RGB, which, we're going to go into later, but it's, again, rules that need to be followed. So those are that kind of breaks down the differences between the two. I was actually, when I was working early in my career, when I was going to school, actually, I was working for an advertising firm as a production artist. And so I would get the files or the ideas from the art directors, and the files were a mess and they looked rough and all this kind of stuff, but the idea was done. My job was to execute the idea in the art director's vision. So making sure that the images were correct, they were high res, all the colors were appropriate and consistent, the typefaces were appropriate and consistent. And then I would build the files based on the art director's idea, and then send my files to the art director, and they would approve it or make changes. And then if there were changes, I would make those changes. So it would go back and forth until it was done. So that was kind of my production side. Now, that really helped me because then I understood sort of the production side of the house. And when I was hired by a firm as a designer, being a creative, I understood how files were supposed to be built, and I understood how the things were supposed to be laid out, and I understood the rules. And that was an important thing for me, in that I was more competitive, because a lot of times design students aren't necessarily taught the rules of production design, and it's important to know those things. We're going to go over a little bit in this class, and then some of the other classes that we teach here at LMC, design classes, we do go over those rules. So it really helped me be competitive, to know and to understand the production side. And then when I was working for the design firm in San Francisco, I had those skills, and so I could build the files correctly. And so in the sense, I was a designer and I was coming up with the ideas, but also I could make sure that the files were built correctly and to spec and RGB, CMYK, whatever. And so that was really important. So it really helped me to have that production background when I was hired as a designer, and it's helped me ever since to understand kind of the rules, understand and be able to speak to vendors like printers and digital developers. So that's kind of where we're going with the two different sides of graphic design. Now, again, we were supposed to have some guests come and speak to you guys on Zoom live. And I invited three people. One person who's in school right now, she transferred to UCLA and she's a design student. The second person is a designer who is a previous student at LMC, transferred to Sac State, and is now working professionally as a designer. Third person is a person I worked with when I was working for that advertising agency in the production department. He's continued to do production, and he's still doing production, and he's going to come and talk to us about what he does and his tasks and the projects that he works on. So what we're going to do is I'm going to record those interviews, and then I'll post them, and I'll have a quiz that will be included in those videos, and you can go ahead and take that quiz. And then let me check to see what else there is. And then I'm also going to assign an org chart exercise. You guys, in the last worksheet, you guys did an exercise where you had to organize the different design jobs into some kind of format. This is going to be a different kind of a thing. Again, this was going to be in person, and we were going to be working in groups to come up with the content. But just know that that's coming after this. I'll post another video pretty soon, and it will explain that project or that exercise. So hope you guys are having a good evening and enjoying your time off this afternoon. And I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.